Welcome everyone to this session on the Lalita-Sahasranama, the 1000 names of the blissful, playful goddess Lalita. I will begin by chanting the dhyana verses, the meditation verses that are part of this beautiful text. Om Sinduraruna Vigraham Trinayanam Manikyamaulispurat Taranayaka Shekharam Smitamukhi Mahapina Vakshoruham Panibhyamali Ratna Chashakam Raktotpalam Bibratim Saumyam Ratnakatastarakta Charanam Paramambikam Dhyayet Padmasanastham Vikasitavadanam Padmapatrayatakshim Hema bham pita vastram karakalitala sadhema padmam varangim sarvalankara yuktam satatamabhayadam bhaktanam ram bhavanim Shri Vidyam Shantamurtim Sakalasuраnutam Sarvasampat Pradatrim Sakunkumavilepanam Samandahasite Kshanam Sasharachapapashankusham Ashesha Janamohini Marunamalya Bhusham Varam Japa Kusuma Bhasuram Japapithu Smari Arunam Karuna Tarangitakshim Dritapasham Kushapushpapana Chapam Animadibhiravritam Mayukhairahamityeva Vibhavaye Bhavani. So, welcome everyone, and I will take you through a meditation very briefly, just 2 minutes, not even 2 minutes, where you will experience a little bit of what the meaning of Lalita is, the playful goddess who is your own consciousness and who dwells in your own heart. First, relax and become aware of your own consciousness, your own awareness. And then, in the area of your heart, really where your heart space is, visualize or imagine that there is an infinite ocean of nectar, and it is expanding in all the directions of space from your own being. Nectar is like a milky, divine liquid that is having all the colors of the rainbow in it. To the front, it is endless. To the back, it is endless. To the side, it is endless. To the other side, it is endless. And it is full of joy, full of bliss. Every instant, it is radiating joy, joy, joy. And in the center of this ocean that is infinite. And which is ultimately your own being, your own consciousness, there is a divine island. The island made of jewels, not ordinary jewels, but living jewels. And in the center of this island, there is a forest of hibiscus trees carrying the most beautiful red flowers. And even deeper in this forest, there is a lake with lotuses. And in the center of this, there is a palace known as the Sri Chakra. It is a beautiful palace. It contains all the powers and qualities of your own absolute consciousness. There is wonderful well-being as one quality. Fortune and luck as another quality. Excellent relationships as another quality. Protection against dangers. And in the innermost part of this palace, there is bliss. And it takes the form of the goddess, the most beautiful, most incredibly blissful, delightful expression that you can imagine. She's radiating rosy light in all the directions. And her eyes are overflowing with compassion. She's your own being in its most perfect expression. And you mentally offer to her something wonderful to smell, something wonderful to taste, something wonderful to feel, something wonderful to hear, something wonderful to see. And thus all your sense experiences are offered up to this perfect expression of all beauty. This is the way to meditate on the playful Lalita as the highest expression of beauty possible, as the highest expression of sweetness, of kindness, excellence. And this is also the meaning of the meditation verse that I had chanted before. Arunam Karuna Tarangita Kshim, that she's rosy in her appearance like the morning sun. And from her eyes, waves of compassion flow. But ultimately, aham ityeva vibhavaye bhavanim. I am this supreme energy, this supreme goddess that contains all existence. And the word aham has a very special explanation in Sanskrit. A is the beginning of the alphabet. Ha is the end of the alphabet. And thus, aham includes the entire alphabet. And since all things we can speak about depend on the alphabet, since all thoughts, all activities of the mind come to expression through words, through a structure brought about by language. Therefore, aham covers all of existence. In Sanskrit, aham means I, but here it is the true I, not the little selfish, egoistic I, but rather the I that encompasses all being and overflows with compassion. To understand Sri Vidya as a path, as an approach to the divine reality of our being, it is important to understand something about symbolism. A symbol is not just a meaningless object or a meaningless sign. A symbol contains in itself what it signifies. Thus, when we say that the Supreme Goddess dwells upon an island of jewels in the ocean of nectar, this is symbolic language, and at the same time, it is linked with a deeper dimension of reality. So when we say this is a symbol, please understand that the symbol also signifies, points at the truth of what it contains, of what it means. For example, if you have a picture of your mother on the wall, no doubt this is externally a picture. It is a collection of colors put together either through photography or through an artist. And yet, the photograph or picture of your mother is also a symbol of your actual mother. You see, this is what has to be understood in the world of Sri Vidya. Now I shall briefly tell you the symbolic story behind this collection of 1,000 names. And don't worry, I will speak about some of the names before we finish. This is a very brief summary that the god of love or desire tried to create a disturbance in Shiva, who is the god of absolute knowledge, samadhi, the absolute state of meditation. This came about in this fashion that the god of desire, Kamadeva, was about to shoot an arrow at Shiva in the deepest meditation, when Shiva sensed that something was different. And he looked up and he saw that Kamadeva, the god of desire, was about to create a disturbance in him. At that instant, fire emerged from his third eye and consumed Kamadeva and burned him to ashes. An attendant of Shiva, whose name was Chitrakama, happened to chance upon that heap of ashes. And he drew a figure of a person in the ashes. This is a little known story. Even the many Hindus among you, you might have not heard of this. And this figure came to life, but it was not Kamadeva in his best version. It was in fact a demon by the name of Bandasura. A demon whose very nature is to cause darkness and to cause confusion, to cause selfishness. And he amassed around him an entire host of similar demons who had very interesting names like Durmada, which means terrible pride, or Raudra Karma, which means cruel action. Those of you who are paying close attention, you will sense the symbolic meaning of the story. I'll give you a little hint. Desire is burned to ashes, but re-arises as a selfish demon who brings darkness and confusion and whose best friends are pride and cruelty. And this chap, Bhandasura, is so successful. And he's very clever. He praises Shiva with special hymns so that Shiva gives him a boon. He says, you can ask whatever you want. And Bhandasura says, I do not wish to be conquered by any man in all the worlds. No man should be able to conquer me. And anyone who tries in my presence should instantly lose their power. With this boon, he takes over the whole universe, not just this one, but many worlds. The divine beings called devas, who are usually in charge of everything, in charge of the sun, the stars, and so on, and internally, who are in charge of our senses, of the balance in our system, of the body, the mind, the emotions. All these beings, known as devas, are conquered by the demon Bhandasura. And they lose their power because of him and his host of followers. In a last effort, the devas, these beings of light, whose only role is to maintain things, to maintain the balance, they come together and they perform a fire ceremony. They light a fire that is huge. It is as vast as the entire earth. And they pray from the depth of their heart for a solution. They connect with the innermost devotion in them, and they pray that some solution, some transcendent solution should now arrive to overcome this demon of darkness and selfishness. And suddenly emerging from this fire is the goddess Lalita, whom we have described earlier. And the devas are now happy, knowing some solution is in sight. But they think this beautiful goddess, she needs a husband. She needs someone to be at her side. And she's so beautiful that none among us, except perhaps Shiva himself, is fit for that. Shiva, however, is an ugly chap. He has matted hair. His skin is covered with ashes. He wears skulls. He's only interested in meditation. He's only alone in the forest, in the mountains, has no connection with the ordinary world. He has burned the god of desire with his anger. How would he be fit for her in this form? Thus, I will summarize the story a little. Through the negotiations of the gods and the sages, Shiva takes on a new form called Kameshvara, the Lord of Love, which is not an ugly form as described before, but is just as splendorous as that of the goddess. He rises to the occasion to deserve her as his spouse. And she, in turn, throws a garland into space which falls across his neck, and thus everyone is filled with joy, and the goddess is requested to destroy Bandasura, the demon of pride and darkness and selfishness, who has taken over everything. She rises, and the Shri Chakra becomes her chariot. And she has a host of goddesses, infinite in number almost, who join her on the quest to overcome the demon. When the goddess and her infinite retinue of goddesses arrive, the demons laugh. And now I will read directly from the text. How could a woman do anything against us, even if she is accompanied by many women? This is the first reaction. And Bandasura sends out his close associate, Durmada, terrible pride. But one of the goddesses, called Sambatkari, removes a gem from his crown, which makes him so angry. How can a goddess with one little twist of her arm remove what is so precious to him, his crown, which is the mark and sign of his position and status? With his face reddened with anger, he attacks her with a weapon. She too becomes filled with red glowing anger and hits him in the heart with a weapon, and he gives up his spirit instantly. Likewise, all the other demons approaching are vanquished by the goddesses, and they flee from the battlefield. And they come to Bandasura himself and say, "How did that wicked woman strike down the mighty Durmada in a fight? How can a woman possess the power to smash our army?" It continues until Bandasura himself meets with Lalita, the playful goddess, and attacks her with various weapons. One of them is called Andhastra, the weapon of blindness. But the great mother, the goddess, dissolves it with her weapon called Chakshurmata, which means the weapon of sight, the weapon of seeing. Bandasura then discharges a weapon called Shakti Nasha, which means the destruction of the female energy. But the goddess shoots back a missile called Vishvavasu, universal goodness. Bandasura shoots another missile called Antakastra, the weapon of death. And the goddess responds with a missile known as the Mahamrityunjayastra, the weapon that overcomes death. The demon then discharges a missile known as Sarvasmritinasha, the destruction of memory or mindfulness. And the goddess responds with the weapon known as Dharana, concentration. And thus the battle continues. I hope you are beginning to see the symbol, the symbolic language. And he makes a last attempt, attacking her with a ferocious cry. But her response is simply laughter. She just laughs. And thus, in the presence of the playful, laughing Lalita, the great Asura, Banda, who has brought darkness over all, who has brought suffering over everyone, is dissolved into nothingness. And the whole world delights. She transforms into Kameshwari, and she reveals that it was through the missile known as Mahakameshwara Astra, the missile of great love, that she defeated him. And this missile, she says, has the splendor of 1,000 suns and the gentleness of 1,000 moons. This amazing story, which I have summarized here for you, it is very long. It is many, many thousands of verses of poetry in the original. This story is the story of your own consciousness in its absolute potential, in its greatest beauty, in its greatest perfection of love, overcoming the demons within you, the demon of pride, the demon of anger, the demon of hatred, the demon of envy. Finally, Banda himself, the demon of darkness and confusion rooted in selfishness. The story continues that a sage known as Hayagriva and his disciple Agastya heard about the greatness of the goddess. And Agastya asks of the sage the many different practices of how to connect with that innermost beauty, that innermost dimension. And finally, Hayagriva, the teacher, reveals 1,000 names whereby we can connect to the goddess Lalita, our own consciousness. These names are to be used sacredly as tools of meditation. So we can take a name and we can meditate upon it, and we can see how our own limited consciousness expands when we do that, when we use something powerful, like a mantra. The names are like mantras and should be understood. The great commentator, Bhaskara says that to chant these names, to use them as tools of meditation or inspiration without understanding their meaning is like trying to create a fire without wood. It is meaningless. So it is very precious that all of you have come here. Our Guruji, our Gurudev had a great respect for the Lalita-Sahasranama, the 1,000 names of the goddess. And so as not to disappoint you, I will now explain the first name. It is Shri Mata and can be translated as the glorious mother. Our true innermost nature, our consciousness in its highest possible expression, is a glorious mother. Whom do we address when we are in suffering? Usually we think of our mother. Bhaskara, the commentator, says, Lokehi dukkha dashayam matusmaranam prasiddham. That when one is in a phase of suffering, it is very common in the world to think of one's mother, isn't it? I hope that people also think of fathers, but I believe that this is quite valid. Therefore, what better way to think of our own innermost being other than as a mother? And not just an ordinary mother, as Shri Mata. Shri has so many meanings. One of them is splendor. One of them is beautiful. One of them is intuition. Another meaning is light. Another meaning is growth, perfection. Shri also means lotus, lotus-like. That which is never affected by the water running down it is a lotus, and it grows in the swamp. If you have ever seen a lotus pond, it is usually quite a murky color of the water, but the most beautiful flower emerges from that. Similarly, our consciousness, when it evolves through meditation, through spiritual practice, opens up like a lotus. Shri also has the sense of a healing remedy. Thus, when we say Shri Mata, all these meanings are part of the name. A mother who is healing, who is splendorous, who is full of wealth and prosperity, who is full of wisdom, kindness. It is all right there in our heart. And the second name, similarly, is Shri Maharagni. Shri is again what I have explained. Maharagni, Maha means great, and Ragni means the queen. Our innermost potential is the great, glorious queen that shines over the kingdom of our being, that rules over that kingdom. And a state of perfect consciousness, perfect awareness, is really a state of mastery. Once we reach that level, there is nothing that rules us. It is a state of freedom. Our life no longer transpires based on anger, desire, but we hold them like weapons. And you will see later in the names, this is actually expressed, that she symbolically holds anger and desire as her weapons. She is their master. Finally, Shrimat Simhasaneshwari, the third name. She is the queen who sits upon the seat of a glorious lion. That lion is our transformed being. When it is not transformed, it is himsa. The commentator says, himsa meaning injury. It causes injury. But when it is transformed, it is Simha, the lion, the king of animals. And she sits upon that lion as the greatest of all seats. So you can take this as a meditation. When you reach the deepest potential of your consciousness, you are then seated on the lion of your own being that you have thus transformed. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask. You can also write them in the chat if you like. I hope you have all benefited from this glimpse into this amazing text and how you can use it. Each name being like a meditation instruction or an inspiration to meditate. So someone asks, how would you incorporate a name in meditation practice? The name Shri Mata, the glorious mother, the mother of kindness, the mother of beauty, splendor, evokes certain emotions in us. And when we take those emotions onto the path of our meditation practice, it transpires differently than when we just sit for meditation without something to concentrate on. You see, the sages who gave rise to this text had realized the truth of their meditation practice. They were perfect in meditation. Therefore, we take this name that the sage gives us as an inspiration for our meditation. It is similar to a Zen koan. Some of you might have heard of this. A Zen koan is a small statement that sometimes is difficult to understand and unfolds its meaning only when we contemplate it. So similarly, the statement here that our innermost consciousness is the glorious mother. If you take this as a content of meditation, it is something very powerful. It can resolve deep emotional issues, knowing that your own nature has the qualities of an all-embracing mother, and that you can thus be like a mother to yourself and towards others. I hope that has been a little help how to take a name into one's practice. So I hope we will be able to go through this journey together. I will, of course, go through more names next time, not just 3, because we want to also finish one day, not just in the next life. Thank you, everyone, and obeisance to the great Guru, the great Master,